All right. Welcome. Let's see if I actually might have forgotten to turn up the volume 1 second. Well, it should be good. My audio should be fine and my video should be fine. So without further ado, happy Monday. Happy start to another wonderful week of October. I hope you guys are doing really well. And as per usual, since my machine is very old, it might not, process things as other machines. So go ahead and yes, thank you so much for the confirmation. My wonderful prof and new member. That's awesome. I look and sound great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's still very warm. I was kind of hoping I'd wear a long sleeve shirt today. But no, that's not happening. Yes, welcome to the chat. We've got Go Team Goes Forever. More. Happy to see you. We've got Big Al Presents. Have a great stream. Engraver of Sound. Thank you, my friend, Big Al. And great thumbnail by, of course, the famous painting by Hopper, Edward Hopper, the realist painter. Actually, to be honest, I need to know the name of the painting. I think it's called The Cafe or something you should remember, but any confirmation in the chat would be very helpful. And then, of course, we must welcome my new member, Professor Geek. Professor Geek has become a YouTube member of Sound Engraver. And it says earlier, I think it said, welcome to the engraved, because I have membership now. So we'll welcome some more people as we come in. But as it happened last weekend, I got my channel monetized, and then they said I was eligible for membership. So I decided to work on a couple ideas for memberships. It's starting out very small, but if you wanted to support my channel for a simple $1.99 a month, you get your own badge, and the badge changes colors every few months, to tell people how loyal you are to me. So that's $1.99 a month, and then for $4.99, I think it's $4.99. Yeah, for $4.99. If you make a recommendation, so if you're a channel member and you make a recommendation for a video game soundtrack or even a film soundtrack, restrictions do apply, of course. What are those restrictions? Something that's, not rated R, for instance. But if you sign up for my membership for $4.99, you can make a comment, a request, and I would actually, with your name and suggestion, I would post a honest professional assessment and score of your favorite soundtrack. So whether that's a game soundtrack or a film soundtrack, or maybe your favorite composer or favorite musician. So you would get a professional musician's take on it and also a composer's take on it as well. So that would be for $4.99 a month. No, actually, I can't remember if it was $4.99. I probably could actually check. Yeah, I think it was $4.99. Yeah, that makes sense, because it would be video content making, specific to those requests. But I do have other ideas I would like to try, including things like workshops or one-on-one private sessions for, composition or songwriting or whatever the case may be. Engraving music, with notation, or something out of Logic Pro. I can't wait to put that up for membership options. However, I need a new computer. My poor thing is, I think, almost 13 years old. So the one I'm using right now, and it just cannot. I'm seeing it in my violin virtual lessons. My online violin lessons. I am seeing that it's not picking up signal that well, and it's not processing things that well. So once I get a new machine, maybe around January, I would start giving options of, whether it's a consultation or a private lesson or a group workshop, with 10 people or fewer. That would be really fun. I love talking about music. I love talking about composition, and I would give you a professional take on it. So let's continue on. Memberships are available to you if you want to be a member and support my channel and support the furthering, the propelling of good art and music and the like. Ace is in the house with us. Good evening, Madam Essie. I kind of like going by Essie. I think that's pretty cool. Welcome to you Sir. And Go Team is here, of course. Big Al, Adega Outlaw. Nice to see you too. And we've got A saying realism is overrated. I don't think it's overrated. It just needs to be in some aspects of art and it needs to be removed in other aspects. And we'll get to it. This is a totally off the cuff stream because I picked up a part-time job that takes about 20 hours out of my week. I haven't really had time to prepare for streams. So this is just kind of a stream of consciousness. Is that how that works? Yeah. And we've got Final Fantasy Fan 12. Welcome. And Zootopia, welcome as well. Okay, and Private Eye. Thank you. Thank you guys for joining me. So we'll go ahead and get started. It'll be a really casual chat on realism and all that. So we'll just go ahead and get started. And welcome to Clitterhoof and Comic Skater as well. Thank you guys for joining me. So I had this in mind. I just want to bring up my microphone just a little bit. Okay. I feel like it's so far away, but I'm sure you can hear me just fine. So I've had it, just kind of thinking about art and entertainment as I always do because I'm a composer and a writer. I've been thinking lately, recently, in these recent weeks of popular entertainment, this idea of realism, really because the reason why I'm thinking about realism in particular is because of comments that I'm seeing and things that are circulating in the YouTube sphere, things that are circulating around and through this platform when discussing things like popular entertainment and popular franchises. And there's this growing line of thinking, if that makes sense. There's this line of thinking that is increasing, I should say, where people are accepting more and more realism in their stories at the expense of art, to the detriment of good art. And so what do I mean by that? Well, realism has its place. Realism is basically in art, it's the representation in art that is accurate to everyday life. This is a general idea of realism, but it's a nice depiction. It could be a beautiful depiction. It could be an excellent work of art that depicts the mundane, that depicts the everyday life, that depicts the everyday man, the everyday woman. So Edward Hopper, for instance, is obviously a really famous example of that, where you would have a woman sitting in a train, or a couple of people sitting at a cafeteria, or someone looking in the mirror, or someone, sitting in a room inside of a room. So it's a physical space that we're used to, whether that's a home or an apartment, or an apartment can be a home, or something like sitting in a car, or talking in the telephone booth, or something like that. Those are actual good representations of realism in art. And of course, there are many other examples as well. And we can maybe explore examples another time. And so realism has its place, especially in 20th century art, but also in the late 1800s. So late 1800s getting into especially the 1900s, kind of post the expressionism, post the absurd. When I say post, I mean after the fact. So everything that followed, the onslaught of World War I, for instance, or where people were really investing in things like psychosis and psychology. So nothing to do with the dreamscape, nothing to do with impressionism or expressionism. Realism is an artistic depiction of the everyday life, and it has its place. It has its place in art history, visual art history, but also in music as well. I've gone over the things like Fluxus and the happening movements and the artist, visual I would say intermedia with music. So I've gone over that before on my streams. And so it's a very interesting idea. It's a very interesting way if you're a visual artist to depict realism. Now, getting into the entertainment aspect, we understand, I think, especially if you've listened to Professor Geek for some time, we've understand realism as applied to a character like Superman with the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve film, where, Richard Donner is now famous, of course, for if I hopefully I'm not misquoting, but basically saying, I believe, or I can believe a man can fly, or I do believe a man can fly. Of course, Big Al and Professor Geek can say the exact quote, but basically with that idea, Richard Donner wanted to make a believable depiction of Superman flying or a human being flying. Because whereas before you had, comic and illustrated depictions of Superman flying, but nothing that was so inventive and innovative in film. I think actually, Professor, if you wanted to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard you say before Richard Donner, Superman would go up, up and away, but then there would be an illustrated or an animated depiction of Superman flying. So Richard Donner wanted to apply a realism to the character Superman with his 1978, 79, which one? His film of the 70s. I think it was 78. Yeah, Batman 89, Superman 78. That's how I remember it. So that's really important. That's an important application of realism. And the word I think he used also is verisimilitude. Verisimilitude. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's actually a term for philosophy. I'm not using it as the philosophical term. I'm using it more for just how Richard Donner applied the filmmaking experience to make Christopher Reeve and in his character Superman go up in the sky and have us believe that he actually, in fact, is flying. He's not an animated character. He's an actual actor flying in his heroics and all that. So that's also another important application. It's another important application for realism. And it's important to bring to the artistic experience the everyday and vice versa. In clever ways, you can bring the everyday mood, the everyday setting, the psychology of a generation, society's interpretation of different things, maybe politics, socio-political things, economics. Art can function in a way that depicts, that represents reality as it is or as it was in recent history or in a historical context. So that's where realism can be applicable. That's where realism should be applied to art. That's where it works. I'm going to grab a swig of water and talk about where it doesn't really work. Okay, so as confirmed, Professor Geek says, yes, in the live action Superman serials with Kirk Allen, his flight was a cartoon animation. Thank you for confirming. Thank you. All right, so where realism doesn't work is when there is a gross exaggeration of the mundane. By gross, I mean gratuitous, too much. It's too much for something that is in a fiction world, in a fictitious world. So let's kind of get into the example of that. So where realism should be avoided is in the fantastical setting, in the magical setting, in the spiritual setting, in something like Greek or Norse mythology, or in something like Tolkien's mythology. Now, with those mythologies, you're working with a human element. Like we have the Greek myths, we have the mythology of Tolkien, we have all these folk tales, from early colonial America, also from Europe, from everywhere around the world. We have folk tales that are, cautionary tales. There's always a moral of the story, but they're usually placed in a fantastical setting, a fantasy, something that is magical or something that is science fiction. Something, we can have our cautionary tales with something like the fictitious worlds of Star Trek, for instance, but it's still fictitious. It's still outside our reality. It's outside the mundane. Me talking to you on YouTube, that's an example of the mundane. Me having finished cooking a meal, eating that meal, that's an example of the mundane. We don't need to really see the mundane in our fiction. We don't need to see the mundane in Star Trek. We can have some complementary scenes where someone is drinking a glass of water. But usually when someone drinks a glass of water in the magical setting, it's to further the plot. Like, oh, maybe the water's been poisoned, or maybe it's going to transform someone into something. There's always a purpose in the fictitious world to do everything. So if a person walks into a room, that in and of itself is a mundane thing. But to retrieve something and then for a villain to lock that person in the room and capture them, well, then you've just escaped the mundane. That's outside your everyday experience. And that's very, very important in the fictitious world. Now, you shouldn't be completely devoid of the mundane, but what I mean by the mundane is anything that is not plot related, anything that is not related to the narrative, anything that's not necessary to the narrative. When you're putting in things that are filler, or when you're putting things that are unnecessary to the actual plot or to the action, when it's just everyday speak between two people or a group of people, when it's a phone conversation with a mom or a sister or something that does not further the plot, now you've reached to the realism that actually is not necessary, that actually should be removed in your stories. What I'm seeing now with this trend is that people are asking for that kind of realism, that unnecessary realism. They're saying, oh, no, we like the real looking people in a fictitious, fantastical setting. We like that these guys are like us, that they work like us, that they talk like us. They look like us. They don't look like the superheroes. We can't relate to the superheroes. We can't relate to the hero's journey. We want to see more of the mundane, to the point where people are actually preferring the new IP. They're preferring something like Star Wars. They're preferring the new look of Star Wars, of the mundane, and not the fantastical Star Wars, not the Star Wars that involves force, the force, the mystical force, that, Star Wars that doesn't involve Sith or Jedi, or just the force in general. Like, people are preferring in Star Wars, no force Star Wars. Now, as an offshoot, as one example, that could probably work. But I don't think people are realizing that might be the case from now on. Or maybe it's not the case, but the point is, people are asking for the mundane of a fictitious world and preferring that to the original fictitious world. What makes Star Wars look like Star Wars? It's the Force. It's good versus evil in the context of the mystical force. Yes, you can deviate from it, but you can't completely remove that context. Because if you do remove that context, it's a completely different science fiction story. And people are not seeing that. That's one example where I'm seeing, I actually prefer I look and sound like this character here. I don't really look or sound like Princess Leia. Therefore, I don't really need a Princess Leia in my Star Wars anymore. I just want the mundane. That's one example. The second example is the mischaracterization of a character. And this has to do with the ideal. So where realism is not necessary, in fact, it should be avoided, is watering down and deconstructing the ideal. So I have family members, for instance, who like the movie Man of Steel, even though people like Professor Geek, Fan Man, they say that that is not an accurate representation of who that character is. Man of Steel, that Superman, that interpretation or version of Superman is someone so full of self-doubt, does not save his father, things that are actually antithetical to the mythos that is Superman. But I have relatives who would say, "Well, I like that movie. I like Superman like that because, oh, well, I've struggled with self-doubt. I like him because he has self-doubt." So the watering down of the ideal, people are preferring the mundane at the expense of the ideal. That's where realism is not necessary. That's where realism should be removed from art. If it's actually taking an established ideal, so in the case of Superman or the case of a Christ figure in a story, well, you really shouldn't. If that's established in culture, you shouldn't water down that figure. That's established. Now you can be inspired by a character like Superman and have his qualities and maybe say, well, I'm going to write another character that's maybe not analogous to him. I'm inspired by him, but I'm going to work with these traits and it's going to be a completely different character. It's not going to have the name, it's not going to have the costume. It's going to be a different character, but I got these ideas from Superman. There are things that I really do like about Superman. Write another character. Don't misinterpret. People say, "Oh no, it's just an interpretation of Superman." And as Fan Man points out, um, if you have a version of Superman, it's it's a subversion, meaning those aren't his words, but basically he's saying you have to have the established ideal that is Superman before you do any other interpretation. If you do any other interpretation, it's always shown in the context of the original, or at least the established. So, so the gross exaggeration of a characterization, like, oh, well, we don't want Superman pure. We don't want him like a Christ-like God. We want him to doubt his powers and to doubt himself, and we want his parents not to be virtuous, and we want his parents to have their doubts and maybe have vitriol in their own way, because my parents had vitriol in their own way. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. It's this kind of self-absorbed, I want my characters to relate to me by them having experiences like I've had my own experiences. I'm like, then you've just brought them to your mundane. Rather, why don't you go to their world? That's the whole point. That's the whole point of storytelling. That's the whole point of popular art and entertainment. It's like you have to bring yourself out of your world into another world. And you can find it to be a very cathartic experience when you're experiencing other characters' experiences that you will never experience. But it's cathartic because you're emotionally relating to them. You're emotionally thinking, intellectually thinking and emotionally thinking, well, I would react this way if such a thing were to happen to me. Are they going to do good by it, or are they going to fall and make mistakes by it? That's the whole point of stories. That's the whole point of um, putting that in your art. So realism has its purpose. It has its purpose. If you want to accurately depict in an artistic way, um, the everyday world, of course. If you want to have a beautiful photograph or a painting of your dog catching the ball, and maybe one of your kids throwing the ball and your dog catching it, that's fine. That's art, and that works. But when you're asking for realism at the expense of what had come before, so when you're asking for realism, I want I want this magical world to look like my world because that's what I experience. I prefer that to the magical world, you know? It's kind of like I think one of the examples, just a sidebar, the Harry Potter movies. I never read the books, but I do remember enjoying the first two films a little bit more than the subsequent films. And I didn't really notice why until I thought about it more deeply. It's because they weren't in their Hogwarts uniforms anymore. There was something about them becoming like looking like they're dressed up like I would see them on the street that actually took away the magic for me. Now, if they were at home, if they were away from Hogwarts, that's fine. But there's something about the school uniform that actually brings upon my own senses a lot more magic. Now, I'm not saying that that was a flaw in the films, but I did feel less magic, even though there was more at stake. I felt that that little detail, that little change, um, pulled me out just a little bit more. I wanted the students to still dress like they would dress in their uniform. Now, that might be a preference, but that's the example that I'm trying to make is don't pull the fantastical into your world and modify it to make it look like your world. You have to leave your world and go to that. So I hope I made sense. Just as a recap, realism does work and it is applied in a very believable way, you know, from the 1800s all the way to now with painting and photographs and all of that. There is a place in art for realism, but when you're dealing with the supernatural and the magical or the ideal, when you're dealing with the unattainable, you know, that you look to and are inspired by, you can't pull it down to your mundane. You can't pull it down to realism. You actually have to remove realism. Maybe work with it in a clever way, but those things can't be brought down to your mundane. You have to leave the mundane and go to the fictional and the fantastical. So, all in all, I will say we're getting too much realism. You know, we don't need realism in Star Trek or Star Wars. Um, you know, even you know, something like Rings of Power, or not Rings of Power. I know that's the current thing. Even with Lord of the Rings, um, especially in this early mythological history, there is a lot more magic. There's a lot more higher order of things. There's a lot more deification of things. Not so much in the Third Age. We see hints of it in the Third Age, but there is a paradise on earth kind of feel with his earlier mythology. And I wouldn't want it to be real, like an actual accurate depiction of England. I want a magical paradise that is to later become England, you know. Anyway, let's go ahead and see what you guys are saying. Private Eye says, yeah, that one. Verisimilitude. Verisimilitude. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a long word, but yeah, that is the word I'm saying. Final Fantasy fan says, as the saying goes, art imitates life and life feeds into art. It can imitate life. You know, actually, RJ from the Fourth Age, he says this very wonderfully. This is pretty much his slogan. Art is a representation of reality. It art is you know, art has to resonate with us as human beings. And the way he says it too, he says art is a representation. I love that. Like, so it's reality repackaged in a form of a story or a symphony or a painting or something like that. And I think that's important. I think that's important. I'm, you know, in the 60s, you know, in the 50s and 60s, and I would say 70s and 80s, there was a huge art movement where it's like, no, everything has to be art. You know, you sitting in a room thinking that's art. I'm like, no, it's not art. A lot of doctorate students, I knew doctorate students who would say stuff like that. They would say, yeah, a piece of cloth on a table, that's art. I'm like, no, it's not. I was not as vocal about it as I am now. Uh, and that was like 15 years ago, and I believed every word they said because I was so innocent. And if they said that to me now, I'd be like, no, it's not. And here's why. Ginyu, welcome. Sadris Moss, also welcome. Nice to see you. A says, people preferring the mundane has led to unnecessary scenes, exactly, of eating at a diner or cafe or coffee shop in so many comics in Marvel and DC. Yeah, I think there can, if I would not be against a dinner scene or a lunch between two people. But what has to happen in that scene, whether it's a book or a film, is the dialogue. So if people are drinking coffee or eating a sandwich, there has to be some intention behind it. There has to be a conflict happening either between the two people or concerning the world around them, or something has to be resolved at the table. So I'm not against eating or drinking in a scene or whatever, but it has to further the plot. That is for sure. Yeah, Final Fantasy fan is quoting, "There's no such thing as good and evil." Did I say something like that? I can't remember the context. There's going to be something or someone in the world that wants you, yeah, dead. But at the same time, people are good because they are capable of doing it. Yeah, yeah. That's actually kind of a Catholic perspective. Like I'm starting to know like the Protestant perspective, at least of our souls, of our image bearing. Is more like, oh, we're so unworthy, we're worthless, we're dust, we're scum and all that. And to a degree there is that we do believe there needs to be redeeming both body and spirit. That is for sure. But with the Catholics, they actually believe more, well, we do need to attain holiness through Christ Jesus, but we are image bearers. God made us in as the Christians believe, God made us in his own image. Therefore, we're not like inherently scum. So we're capable of evil, but also, as you say, we're capable of doing good as well. Moving on. Oh, is that all? Oh, oh man, I missed some comments. 1 second. Yes. Private Eye says, you want good realism? Read the life and times of Scrooge McDuck. These comics can break someone's heart. You mean like the Christmas Carol with Ebenezer Scrooge, or actual the Scrooge McDuck? He's a cool character. I grew up with DuckTales. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I know how to spell it. I just don't know how to pronounce it. Verisimilitude. Well, if someone, maybe if Professor Geek has another video coming, he can say it probably better than I can. I know Fan Man with his new podcasts, he's doing these Superman Lives podcasts. He can say the word pretty well. Oh, thank you, my love, for the super chat. We've lost the ability to see and apply metaphor. I know. Metaphor was the thing we were taught in school, like in 3rd and 4th and 5th grade. Like we were taught the significance of metaphor. We were taught the significance of analogy. and simile. What is similar? What can be also depicted as something, a depiction of something rather than that actual thing. People say things like metaphorically speaking. Those are important. Those are important. Welcome, Aloise, the viewer. Thank you for coming. Okay, bye, Ace. I'll see you later. Thanks for coming by. No, the actual comic series, Private Eye says, the actual comic series called Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck by Don Rosa. Actually, that does sound familiar now that I think about it. All right. So Glitterhoof says, I grew up in Brie. Metaphorically speaking? Or real life? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I think that's all I had to say about realism. I did have another topic, but I didn't prepare for it, and my thoughts are not quite aligned just right to talk about it. But I think for my next topic, I would just talk about messaging in art. And I did a stream a while back on it, but there is new context. In fact, I think completely different context. It's about people, basically, just kind of people being tired of certain things being analogous to political things in real life, where people would say, no, I can't use this as an example in my plot because it hits so close to home with a certain political thing. And I'm like, if it's part of the plot, it's part of the plot. I'll think about it more, but the example I'm thinking of is, I have in my story this crisis, this evacuation crisis. It's called a refugee crisis, I guess, because there's no other choice. They're evil people in a certain time of history in my story, not in the plot, but just kind of in the context. Evil people did very, very evil things, and because of that, people have to leave. So, and people would now kind of like give that a wide berth, like, no, you can't put immigration and evacuation and refugees in your story, because that then you're making that analogous to the recent things. I'm like, no, this only has to happen because of the plot. It's not a signifier of anything current. It's not even a signifier of my opinions on those things. It's just part of the plot. And so I think people are really hypersensitive to, like, no, you can't put that in there. There's another one too where people will say where there is blatant agenda in something, like the recent stuff in Star Wars. I don't know the recent stuff, but there's been, of course, political messaging there, and then the argument would be, well, Star Wars has always been political. It's like, no. Like, you can put politics in your world building. So I guess in that sense, yeah, Star Wars is political, but not in the context of real life politics or how we're, employing that. So, but I'll probably think about it a little bit later and kind of cement it into something. Oh, Wolften is here. Welcome, sir. Nice to see you. Well, Aloise is here too, so I'm glad Wolften came by. And Glitterhoof, are you from? Okay, are you from England? That's cool. I hope you're doing well. I know you put up with a lot of things over there. Now I'm gonna say this very carefully. I noticed that Go Team Ghost Planet says they ruined Velma. They didn't ruin Velma, because Velma is as Velma was ever Velma, as we know Velma to be. No matter what they say now, Velma was always Velma as you and I knew her to be. You know what that means. That's all I'm gonna say. So Glitterhoof is actually making parts of England analogous to Middle Earth. So Old Forest is Yorkshire. is it Barrow Downs? Is that how you pronounce it? North of England, the city of Brie, near Newcastle, Monsool, the Scottish Highlands. Oh, that makes sense. I can see that. So, correction, you did grow up in the Shire. That's okay, Wolf10. You got a new job. I got a new part-time job too. It's, working is good. Working is good. All right. So, oh, okay. Yeah. And again, you don't have to be specific if that made you uncomfortable, but that's good. But yeah, there are some people from the UK who listen. I've got some people from South America, which is cool. From my listeners, I think are from Germany and Japan. Like as far as like music, listening to my music or SuperCollider or something like that. Anyway, what else is there to talk about? That was actually shorter than I thought. So I think I was I said everything that I needed to say. I just wanted to say that like if you've got this magical, fantastical world established, or a science fiction world established, like Star Trek or Star Wars or something, or Lord of the Rings, if you've got already a world that's decades old, that has long been established as a feel, as an environment, it's kind of disconcerting for people who say they're fans, and they are fans. I'm not saying they're not fans, but when they say they're fans and saying, well, you know what? I kind of like the look of this. In fact, I prefer this to the original. Then it's like, then you want something else that's not what it should be. Anyway, hopefully that made sense. Well, I'm cool with hanging out with you guys. I'll do a couple announcements, and then we can still talk, or we can sign off because that's actually all I had to say for tonight. Let me grab a swig of water. But don't go anywhere. I mean, I might think of something else to say today. So, I'm as far as my music is concerned, I'm still working on my one track. Oh, I should talk about that. I actually should talk about that. Let's talk about real quick music. I did a poll. I don't know if you guys saw it. I could look. Yeah, I could probably look it up. I could look it up, and then I can show it to you, if that means anything. Let me go ahead and show you this poll. I mean, you can actually go on my channel and see it. Let's see. Poll. Okay, let's see. I'm going to share that. There are new terms on StreamYard. All right. Yeah. Can you see that? It's my channel. Yeah, there you go. All right. So you can see I did a poll a few days ago saying, which do you prefer, from your favorite music artists? If the artist is releasing on Spotify a single track versus an EP album. EP, I say EP album. You can call it an EP. It's probably redundant to say album, but EP is basically a shorter album. It varies between 2 to 4 tracks usually, maybe 5 tracks, but really under 25 minutes. So a shorter album. And then also a full-length album. So you're looking at 30 minutes or longer, probably even 40 minutes or longer, and 8+ tracks or so. And I was asking, so for 32 votes, I got, 25% of those people prefer their artists, release the single track. Some people prefer, or 9% of the 32 prefer EP album, and then 66. It was a huge margin in favor of full-length album. I posted that because I realized that I do need to continue composing music and releasing as fast as I can, but my albums are the things that people listen to the most. And I'm like, well, I always try to release something while working on an album. It's been hard. It's going to be especially harder now that I've taken on another part-time job. So I have two part-time jobs. I teach. We're looking at 12 students now. It could be more. I would love 15 students. That would be great. Plus a part-time job uh, at this wonderful historic site at a gift shop. It's been fun. It's been really great. We had so I'm at this historical site at this wonderful general store. It's this wonderful gift shop, and we had 200 middle schoolers come by the store today. I'm actually surprised my voice is not giving as much as it could have been. And I gave all these kids, what they wanted, like jewelry and candy and stuff like that. I've learned those. It's an American heritage store. It's wonderful. It's just in a very historic spot of colonial American history. And I have found one thing for sure is that no matter what media says, and I probably shouldn't say it on YouTube. probably I could probably become ineligible, but um, we have these great derringers and like inoperable replicas of little handheld rifles, that people used back in the 17 and 1800s. And that is the first thing. Well, actually, that's the first thing they see upstairs. Or they see two things upstairs. I was working in the upstairs department, and there's this display of guns and artillery and weapons and stuff like that, and sabers. There is one saber. I don't know how much it costs. And then there used to be a display of historical stuff, like American stuff, like anything Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson related. And they moved it. I'm like, oh no, where'd that go? But I found where they were. But replacing that was these beautiful Christmas snow globes. They're in the shape of beautiful lanterns, like lanterns you would hold in the Victorian age, and they had Santa and snowmen and boy singing or hanging something on a Christmas tree is so beautiful, and it lights up. And so the girls gravitated toward the snow globes and stuff like that, and the boys, oh my goodness, you couldn't, like, two boys actually bought two replicas by their supervision of their parents. They bought two replicas of these derringers, and beautiful designs too. But it was almost hard to get to those items because the boys were like, oh, the boys like their toys. It's like that's not gonna go away no matter what the media says. That's just not gonna go away. I was and so they got it boxed up, and they were on charter buses, so they did have to have the parents, like the chaperones have to call the parents to make sure it's okay. They're totally inoperable. They can't be used like in an actual capacity. But I just thought that was the greatest thing. Like, all the women went to the beautiful snow globes, and then myself included. And then the boys were just so excited to see the weapons. So thank you for bringing up a topic, Big Al, my friend. Any Halloween traditions you're planning to do? Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So Halloween falls on a Monday this year. So I'll announce it, and I'll keep announcing it, as we get to that point. I will be streaming, but the plan actually is for me to be on Professor Geek's channel with him and me on a stream of his channel that Halloween. We do plan on being in costume. That's the goal, right, Prof? I think that's the goal. So we do plan on wearing costumes in front of the camera and all that, and just talking. Up to this point, and we're kind of behind just with my new work schedule, but up to this point for October, we've been watching the Addams Family, the old black and white Addams Family, and then also the Munsters, which is also black and white. I guess the pilot was in color, but they went back to black and white, which is a really good call. Aesthetically, it just looks better. It just looks like what noir would be, but just comedy, family dynamics. So we've been watching those, and then we gotta get we'll get into the cartoons like Scooby-Doo. The prof has been watching the real Ghostbusters animated series with Alyssa. I mean, I like it, but like I don't like it, enough to watch too much of it. And then what was the other one? And then I think he's also with his daughter watching Archie's Weird Mysteries. So yeah, Universal stuff. I guess we need to watch a Universal monster movie. We at least one. I need to do at least one. And it's kind of funny, Big Al. Professor Geek probably could pull off dressing up like Ernest, but he wouldn't. I know he loves Jim Varney, but he doesn't have that look. He doesn't have that look. He has the voice though. He actually can. Prof is very good with voice work. Like he can do voiceovers pretty easily. He does all sorts of different characters, and I think he can. Yeah, he can pull off Ernest's voice. I don't know if he would pull off the look though. But yeah, Prof does have a costume plan, and it makes sense if we do get this costume in time. If he can find it, it absolutely makes sense that he would. It absolutely makes sense for him to get this costume. And then I have a costume that also, at least by Prof's, by his account, I fit this costume quite well. I hope. Professor Geek says Sound Engraver does a great Ernest impression. Yeah. I don't. Yeah, no, he's being a little. I think he's kidding, right? Because he'll do something earnest, and then I'll just mock it, like, because I'm okay with Ernest, but like I don't like everything Ernest. I'll just watch the Christmas stuff, and I have yet to watch Ernest Goes to Jail. So anyway, so yeah, well, that's what I was talking about, just work and stuff. So my video, like I need to get another video out there. I'll probably do I'll try to do a membership video just to just show people that I can be like you can sign on, just as a member to support the channel. I'll have my nice voice, and my nice voiceover work and my music. I'll compose something and all of that. Just gonna say that her frustration really shines through. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But anyway, what was I saying? I will probably do another video on my piece that I'm working on. And then, man, I gotta get back to SuperCollider. Like, I was supposed to have like a SuperCollider September, and it just didn't work. Life gets in the way. You gotta find a job. You gotta make a living and stuff like that. So, anyway, that's kind of all I'm saying. I don't know what I'm saying. I think we'll probably end it there. Just make it a short hour stream. So next week we'll be streaming as normal, 9:30 Eastern time. And then just look out for a fixed video, probably an original music video and all of that. I need to do a video game soundtrack. I need to do one more. So maybe something like that into this month. A video game soundtrack of Donkey Kong, the last one. So I think we will end it there. I know that was a shorter talk than normal. It's like not even an hour, but I feel good about wrapping it up now. But thank you guys so much always for watching and listening. And until I see you next, you always keep producing, promoting, and preserving the good art you love. And I will catch you later. Take care.